Uh, we kind of went over this just a little bit last week, and I think it touched on it. We'll touch just a little bit on, are you a lawgiver and judge, or are you a doer of the law of God? Basically, kind of like what he said when he first got into chapter 1. Are you just a hearer of the word, or are you a doer? And this is, are you going to judge somebody? If you're going to judge somebody, then you're a judge. You're not a doer of the law, but you're just a judge of the law. When I look at this verse, I can't help think of, well, first of all, let's read this. Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. So he's talking to his Christian brethren, and that's in the children of Israel, that's in the diaspora that's spread out all over the place. They went to get away from the persecution that was happening in Jerusalem. So they are all over the place, and James is writing to them, and he says, do not speak evil of one another, brethren. And he who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law, but a judge. And there is one lawgiver who is able to save and destroy. Who are you to judge another? And when I read this, I can't help but think, as far as this passing judgment of Matthew chapter 7, verses 3 through 5. Scott, you want to read that for us? I'm going to pick on you for a little. Matthew 7, 3 through 5. Where am I? There we go.
Why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not notice the beam of wood in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me make this splinter out of your eye, and look, that's a beam of wood that's in your own eye? Hypocrite, first take the beam of wood out of your eye, and then you can see clearly to take the splinter out of your brother's eye. Don't give what is holy to dogs, or toss your pearls before pigs, or they will trample from under their feet, turn and tear you to pieces.
Is it 7 correct? It was through 5, but that's good. We're looking at that right there. Can you just imagine when you're looking at your brother and you're judging your brother, here you are with a big old plank in your eye, but your brother's just got a little speck in his. And yet you want to try to judge him and correct him and get him all straightened out. And so you're not really looking at yourself. You're looking at somebody else, and you're judging your brothers, but you're not looking real close at yourself and seeing where you're at. Because you got a big old plank. You need to get that plank out of the way before you get rid of that speck that's in your brother's eyes. And sometimes we can be that judgmental, can't we? We can look at other people. I know if I look at somebody else, sometimes I can say, well, I'm a pretty good fella. I'm good. I'm righteous. I'm a really great person. When I start looking at myself and comparing it to who I need to be looking and comparing it to is to God, then I fall a lot shorter. I can always find somebody I'm better than, or, or more holier than. But when I start comparing myself to God and looking at Him and judging me from His standard and His standpoint, then that's a whole different thing. So we need to be careful not to judge our brethren without, and, looking at ourselves. And this, where it says, do not speak evil of one another, what that's saying is they're basically maligning their brothers. So what they're really doing, instead of building them up, that's one of the reasons why we come together on Sunday morning, is to build each other up, edify one another. What are they doing? They're tearing them down. And
So.
go ahead.
So many times people do that in order, they think they're building themselves up. If they can push a neighbor down, they look at it as building themselves up. It gives them confidence. And I got a mic here. Thank you anyway. Gives them confidence, makes them feel bigger and better. And like, Paul in Galatians chapter 6 said, rather than if a brother be overtaken in a fault, you which are spiritual, restore such a one in a manner of meekness. He tells us how to do it. Don't go in and rough it up. And then he goes on and says, consider thyself, lest thou also be guilty of doing this. That's putting in my own words. Be guilty of doing something. That brother comes to you, payback may be rough.
Yeah, and that's what I had here. Part of the purpose of them tearing somebody down is to make themselves look better. And that's a note that I had here in my notes that I look at. We don't want to do that. We don't want to be guilty of trying to tear somebody down. I know sometimes, when people at work, sometimes what they want to do is they want to tear somebody down so that they can try to build themselves up so they can look better to the boss and maybe get a promotion or whatever. That's not how you go about doing it. You just do your job, and if you get passed over, then that's them. But that's hard. That's hard to do. I mean, it's easy to sit up here in a classroom situation and say, you got passed over. Pray about it and ask God to help you with that situation and how you look at it and stuff, and also to pray that next time when that position comes open that they will see your value and see your worth and not pass over you. Sometimes you get passed over just because you're a Christian and you want to do things right. Sometimes some people don't like Christians and them standing up for truth and right. They don't like somebody. I know I wasn't one of the most famous, most people liked me at work, but they didn't like my work habit too much because the supervisors goes, well, here's somebody who does their job, who goes out there and works hard every day and tries to get through, and they don't just burn overtime for the heck of burning overtime and getting overtime. And so your other fellow employees don't like that much. They like the idea of just staying out there and wasting time and stuff. But anyway, so be careful that we don't judge our brothers. When you do this kind of thing, you're not practicing the most important part of the law, and that's loving one another. Loving God first and foremost, and then loving one another. We should love one another and care for one another. And when I'm reminded of this last part here, there is one lawgiver and who is able to save and destroy. Somebody read Matthew 10:28. Zach, can you get that pretty quick? Matthew 10:28.
And thank you. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell.
And that's who you want to fear. You don't want to be such a judge and a lawgiver and everything that you can only do one thing. The only thing you can do to me, you might destroy my body. That's all you can do to me. But who we need to fear and respect and honor is the lawgiver and that judge who can destroy both the body and the soul. And so that's who we need to be ready to give an account to, and we need to let that person be the judge, and not so much us to be judges of people. that doesn't not mean that you don't try to help someone who's gone astray. That's not saying that. That's saying in this particular type judgment, you just don't judge like that. And whatever judgment that you go against, according to this, the first few verses of that Matthew 7, I believe it is, the first like couple verses, judge not that you be not judged, because whatever measure or judgment you use, that's going to come back to you. That's how you're going to be judged. So if you want to judge somebody, be prepared to be judged by that same kind of judgment. And that, if you don't show no mercy, don't expect mercy. And if you don't have love for that person that you're going out to look at and examine, like it's your brother, then don't expect love back, because that's what kind, whatever kind of judgment you present, that's what kind of judgment you're going to have measured back at you. There it is. All right, who's in charge? This next section, I think you'll understand when I put this who's in charge, when we get to this next section, that you'll understand what I'm saying. And verses 13 through verse 17, it says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and buy and sell and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It's as a vapor that appears for a little time and then it vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil." Verse 17, "Therefore to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin." So here, if you look at it, who's in charge of your life? If this first part of this section is, who's in charge of his life?
We are.
He was. He was in charge of his life, and totally. I mean, he wasn't looking at God at all, was he, to direct it and stuff. I'm going to go tomorrow. I'm going to go to a city, and I'm going to buy and sell, and I'm going to spend a year there, and I'm going to make a profit. And so, without any foresight whatsoever, without any thinking about God at all, he's all thinking about, I am going to live tomorrow. And I am going to go into such and such a city, and I'm going to buy and sell, and I'm going to profit. Scott?
That's presumptuous living. That's assuming that, that'll be the will of God that you do that. God rebukes that because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. So this man's presuming that he's going to do all this. He doesn't know the future. God does.
Hey, that's exactly it. And that's the part starting in verse 14. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. How do you know that the Lord's not coming back tomorrow? How do you know that the end of your life is tomorrow? How do you know any of that? So you going out here making all these plans based on the fact that you're not even thinking about the Lord could return tomorrow. You're not even thinking about the fact that something may happen to you and you may be gone tomorrow. He wouldn't have no consideration for none of that. He just says, I'm going to do all this because I'm going to be alive tomorrow, and I'm going to buy and trade and sell because I know I'm going to be here. But what the problem is you don't. You don't know that. And that's the question here. He says, well, what is your life? And it's like a vapor. We've all seen them little teapots and things like that you put on an eye, and that water starts going, and you see that vapor going up, and it's gone like that. There it is, and it's gone. And that's what your life is. And no matter how long we live, it's still like a vapor that appears for a little while and then it vanishes away. And verse 15, he says, instead you ought to say, if the Lord wills. Then what's the first thing that there? If the Lord wills, we shall what?
Live.
We're going to live. The thing that you were taking for granted there is we're going to be alive. That's the first thing you ought to say, if the Lord wills, if I'm alive tomorrow. Is there anything wrong with the planning part?
No.
No, there's nothing wrong with planning. It's just when you leave God totally out of your plans, totally, and everything is dependent on you. You're in charge of your life, and God's not in charge. And if we say, okay, I'm going to go tomorrow, and I'm going to buy and sell and spend a year in a place, and I'm going to make a profit, that's not the problem. It's when we leave God totally out of that picture. Instead, we ought to say, if God wills, and then the Lord wills, I will do this or do that. And therefore, then you're not leaving God out of that picture. And here, he's totally thinking he's in charge instead of allowing God to be in charge. And that is, according to verse 16, now you boast in your arrogance. Why is that boasting? Why is he boasting?
Because he's depending wholly on himself. Tell him what he can do.
Yeah, I'm in charge of my life, basically, again. That kind of idea, and I have no thought of God and what he's going to have plans for me tomorrow and in the future. And all this boasting, that's evil. That's not good when we leave God completely out of the picture. And then it says, therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Someone turn to Proverbs 27:1. Daniel, have you got that? Proverbs 27:1.
Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring forth.
Okay, so that leaves all the boasting out. This kind of reminds me of the story that, well, I'm lost my, okay, here. In Luke 12 and verses 18 through 21. Scott, have you got that? So you got the mic there. You can read that. This is, I'm sorry. Luke 12, 18 through 21. This kind of reminds me of what our verses that we're talking about here says.
So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God.
He's had all of his planned out. Man, I've got plenty now. I'm stored up. I'm set for life. I'll just tear down my little barns here, and I'll build me some bigger barns, and I'll store all the stuff in here, and eat and drink and be merry. And then what did God say to him?
Thou fool.
Thou fool, this day your soul's going to be required of you. Then who's all this stuff going to be then? And so again, when we leave God out of the picture and we put everything on us and say, look what I've done and look what I've accomplished. I don't care what you do in life and how successful you are in life and what you do. God gave you the talent to do it. He gave you the blessing to be able to do what you do and to be able to have the, be able to do things that maybe other people couldn't do.
You know, there's a feller in the Old Testament that made that boast, you know. King of Babylon looked around the city and said, look what I have accomplished.
A lot of the wars and stuff is based upon this power struggle, and I've got a lot, but I need more, and so I'm going to go take this nation over here. Why? Why are you going to take that nation over? Because I want to be bigger, because I want to be better, and I want more. Scott?
Yeah, I was going back. We all make plans in life. We all have ideas what we want to do and where we want to be and whatnot. But the Christian understands that if God wills this, that God is with me, no matter, things don't always, as we all know, work out as we thought they were. But the Christian can understand that and deal with that, knowing that it just wasn't the right time. God didn't have in his plans for me right now. But the world sees it as, you know, it's a failure, and that's why there's so much trouble in the world. People, you know, suicides, whatever, personal depression, because they lay these plans out, these goals, these things they foresee, and they don't work out, and they just feel devastated.
Yeah, there's movie stars have gone out and killed themselves, and they had everything. They had the looks, they had the money, they had whatever man thinks they want, the women, the cars, the whole everything, and yet they commit suicide. And you looking at it from our standpoint, sometimes we don't understand that. But what do they got to live for now? I mean, really, once you accomplish all that, then pretty much everything's, they've got nowhere else to go. To them, they don't feel like they got anything else to accomplish. In Matthew 16:26, it says, what shall a man gain, or what shall a man profit if he gain the whole world and he loses his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? And so it doesn't matter if you gain the whole world. You can have, think about that. If you could gain everything in the whole wide world, but if you lose your soul, what have you profit?
Like Solomon said, it's all vanity and vexation of spirit.
And even if you could, what will you give in exchange for your soul? Because we'll do that. Sometimes if we're not careful, people will do that. They'll give their soul up for money, for positions, for power, for whatever like that. And so, we need to be careful that we leave God in charge of our lives and that we don't become the ones that's in charge of us. And we need to be careful to make sure that God's in our plans. It's okay to plan. It's okay to, set out and have goals in your life. I think God wants us to do that. But put Him in those plans. And don't exchange your soul for anything. It's nothing that's that valuable. Okay. The rich oppressors will be judged. This is James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. And verse 5 says, verse 1 and chapter 5 says, come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. As James is saying here that you need to, these rich oppressors, instead of, you think you've got it made now, you think you're on top of the world right now, you need to understand something. What you really need to be doing is howling and weeping And because there's fixing to be the great misery upon you that's going to be put upon you. Henry, you got, if you can, if you don't mind, read Joel 1:8. This is kind of the idea of what they should be doing. It's kind of like when a young woman in her youth loses her husband, you know how they feel. This is kind of the idea. He says, you need to be like that young lady that's lost her husband at a very young age, and it's devastating to them.
I'll get you in a minute. What, Joel, what now?
1:8.
Lament like a virgin girded with sackcloth for the husband of her youth.
Yeah, so that's saying just what I was just saying, that here's a woman that's just weeping and wailing and so sad and so hurt that she's lost her husband when she's very young, and they just got started in life. And it's bad to lose them anytime. I mean, when you've been with them a long time, or when you've been with them a very short time. But when you're just getting started and something happens out of the blue like that, it's pretty devastating. And that's what Joel's saying. And that's how you rich people here, you rich oppressors ought to be. You need to be weeping and howling like this young virgin, like this young woman who had just got married and lost her husband, and how she's weeping and wailing. Scott, Proverbs 11:28.
He who trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like foliage.
Don't trust in your riches. And the righteous is the one that's going to flourish. The righteous is the one that's going to really be blessed one of these days. You who's trusting your riches and that they're going to bless you and stuff, weeping and howling on that. Zach, Luke chapter 6, verse 24 through 27. Daniel, 1 Timothy 6, 9 and 10. Luke 6, 24 through 27.
But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full, for you shall hunger. Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so did your fathers to the false prophets. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you.
Okay, so woe to you who are rich, for you're going to receive your consolation. Your consolation was that you were rich. That's what you're going. But you're going to understand that you shall hunger, and your laughing is going to be gone. Your fathers that spoke well of you, they're not going to have nothing good to say about you anymore. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that's coming upon you. Daniel, 1 Timothy 6, 9 and 10.
But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows.
Okay, so my main idea here is it wrong to be rich? There's nothing wrong with being rich. And in fact, they help the church out a whole lot. And that's who you depend on a lot of times to keep the church going, is those who have enough money to help the church when they have financial things that come up. Like when we had to buy that air conditioner, there was those who were able to put a good deal of money into those, help pay for that air conditioners and stuff. So when you use it properly, it's great, and it's a great blessing to be able to have money like that. But the love of money is where the root of the problem is. And we're going to see what their real problem, these here's real problem was in the next few verses. It wasn't the fact that they were rich. That wasn't their problem. It's what they were doing with it or wasn't doing with it. All right, get over. I can get it up there a whole lot quicker than I can get it on here. All right. Verse 2, your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eating. So here again, their problem wasn't that they were rich. What's their problem? What's happening to their riches? What's happening to their garments here?
Disappearing.
And they're moth-eaten. What's happening to their riches?
Cankered.
They canker, they're corrupted. So no matter here what area you're talking about, whether you're talking about maybe metal, gold, silver, and things like that, or whether you're talking about garments, or whether you're talking about food, these kind of three areas that you're looking at, their problem wasn't that they had these things and that they shouldn't have them. The problem was you've got so much of it and it's stored up and you're hoarding it to the point that you're not helping those who need it, and it's ruining. Everything it's either spoiling or getting rotten, or it's been your garments that you got all stored up back there. Instead of helping somebody that's poor and helping somebody put clothes on somebody that needs clothing, what are you doing? You're hoarding it up. You're just piling it up in there, and what's happening to it? The moth is eating it. Your food's ruining. All this maybe wheat and everything that you've got stored up. You got so much stored up, and you're just hoarding it, and you're not helping the poor or anybody else who needs food to eat, and it's ruining. And your gold and silver and stuff that you have, it's not really tarnishing. Is probably not really what's happening to it, but it's ruined. You can't really use it anymore. Maybe you've had it so long and you've gotten older now, and now you're so old that you can't even enjoy it. But you've hoarded it up, and it's not doing anybody any good. And the problem with it, well, let's look at a few verses here. Matthew 6, 19 and 20. Very familiar passage. Henry, you've got a mic, so. And Scott, 2 Corinthians 4, 18. You got the mic there, so.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
19 and 20. Lay not up yourselves treasures upon the earth where moth and rust doth corrupt and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt and where thieves do not break through and steal.
Nothing wrong with laying up for yourself treasures. Nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with it is when that becomes your God. And you're accumulating it and you're laying up for your treasure, the things here on the earth, and you're putting your confidence on things here upon the earth. Well, when you do that, and the moth is eating it up, and the food's getting destroyed, and your money is being tarnished, how's that helping you in heaven? How's that laying up treasures for what? For your future as far as heaven goes.
When you go to heaven, you're going to leave them here.
Yeah, you're not carrying none of this stuff with you. You're just talking about storage. And how are you using these things? 2 Corinthians 4:18.
While we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen, for the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal.
So what are they laying up for, depending on here in that verse there? They're looking at things that are seen, right? The things that are seen are what? But things which you don't see, and that's where you put your trust and confidence and your riches in, those are what kind of things?
Heavenly.
Eternal, too.
Eternal.
That one is temporary and is eternal. What are you depending on? What are you putting your trust in? Things that you can see? Are you putting your trust in things here up on this earth? And when you die, where's your treasure going to be? And that's the question. We'll let Scott read Colossians 3, 1 and 2. Colossians 3, 1 and 2.
So if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things.
Okay, where's Christ at? He's above, right? So what are we putting our minds on and seeking? We want to seek things that are above and not things here up on the earth. And that's what these rich men were doing here in this and in the book of James. They were putting all their trust and all their confidence and everything in things that here on the earth, to the point that they were hoarding them rather than, helping the poor and things. So that's where their trust and confidence was. We need to have our trust and confidence on things above.
We need to realize what Peter said in 2 Peter chapter 6. When God is done with this earth, everything here is going to melt with
it's gone.
fervent heat.
Exactly. So we'll start with verse 3 next week. Maybe we can get through this other part